We are on the cusp of a major social change. Do you feel it? Even if you don't, make no mistake, change is coming, and it is going to be unforgettable. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Hart, and here on Prime Spark, where we work with and on behalf of women over 55, I want to help you find that spark that will ignite your way forward, reflect your gifts to the world, and illuminate your path through this next stage of life. Through these podcast conversations, I hope to inspire you to see how you can make a significant contribution to some of the gnarly problems that are facing us right now. Join me, and together let's discover our Prime Spark. Hi, and welcome to Prime Spark. I'm Sarah Hart, and I'm so happy you're here with us. Prime Spark is designed for women over 55 or close to help us all live our happiest, most fulfilling, and productive lives now and in the future. The mission of Prime Spark is to change the way our society sees and treats older women. That's a big mission, which only means we all need to be involved, and we need to get going now. And today I have the pleasure of talking with Louise Nayer, a woman whose work I greatly admire. Louise Nayer has written 6 books, 2 poetry books, Keeping Watch and The Houses Are Covered in Sound, and co-authored How to Bury a Goldfish, about rituals for everyday life. She is the author of Burned, a memoir which was an Oprah Great Read and won the Wisconsin Library Association Award. She is also the author of Poised for Retirement, Moving from Anxiety to Zen, and Narrow Escapes. Louise is a member of the Writers' Grotto, a longtime educator, retired City College of San Francisco professor, and now teaches through Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at UC Berkeley and at the Grotto. She has done numerous radio spots, including on NPR. Welcome, Louise. I'm so happy you're here.
I'm happy to be here.
So just getting started, let me ask you, do you experience getting older? And if you do, what is that experience? And if you don't, why is it that you think that you don't?
Interesting question. I would say body-wise, yes, I experience getting older. Some arthritic feelings. I don't have perhaps quite the amount of endurance that I did, but I find when I do exercise, and I've started doing Zumba classes again, that, it gives me more breathing power. I've actually gotten over an RSV virus, so my voice is a little funny, but actually exercise really, really helps. So I would say yes, in terms of my body. Every once in a while, I have those, quote, senior moments, which, one of my kids said I've always had, so maybe it's not a senior moment, being a little spacey artist type or whatever. And my neck hurts because I graded papers for a long time. So yes, in my body, sometimes in my mind. But I think what you brought up is, the messages society gives us just add to that. So if you can just not think about that and just, wake up and, maybe it's a little harder to move, but otherwise, on the whole, I'm fine.
That's, Louise, it's really interesting because I've talked to so many women and I'll bet you, I've never kept track of this, but I'll bet you 90% say pretty much what you said. That, physically I can feel, this, that, and the other thing, and things are stiff and so forth. But basically I'm fine, and so I find that really fascinating that our society keeps putting out messages that don't portray us like we are.
Exactly. And
It's frustrating.
It is. And I think, as somebody who was a bit of a hypochondriac when I was young, I think these messages can lead us to constantly think things are wrong when they're not. Not to say you shouldn't go to the doctor if you feel a pain in your chest or something going on. But I think there's a way in which the fear of things is exaggerated because of the messages that are coming down.
I absolutely agree with you. And from just what you said before, I think an example of that is forgetting something and saying, oh, it was a senior moment. Now, all my life, I have forgotten things. And I've never heard a young person who forgot something say, oh, that was a younger moment.
Right, exactly.
It is, yes, we do sometimes tend to lose short-term memory as we get older. And that can happen. But so often things that happen have always happened. And it's just now we have a name for it. It's sort of like when they developed the word midlife crisis, suddenly everybody was having one.
Right, exactly.
Louise, I have been reading Narrow Escapes, and there are parts of that book, and I was reading it at night, and I didn't get enough sleep on some nights because I could not put it down. I mean, the things, a lot of the book, but the things you went through when you were having your time in the time after your studies, when you were traveling in Northern Africa, it was fascinating and scary, and you got out of all of those.
Yeah, well, that's the narrow escapes part, there but for fortune. I must say that having grown up in New York City, there was a way in which maybe I wasn't quite as naive as it seems, but there were so many people, and I'm not saying everybody, around the late 60s, early 70s, young women really feeling a sense of liberation in their lives. I mean, the advent of the pill, the advent of, trying to break away from, quote, bourgeois norms. And I hitchhiked in Northern Africa. I mean, I would die if my kids hitchhiked. And I probably didn't tell my mother. Maybe she figured it out. But, people just lined up on the road. And I did get out of some situations with a combination of luck and probably a little bit of street smarts. Like the driver who was pretty scary, and I wasn't sure what he was going to do to me and my friend, another woman, but he had a picture of his kids on the dashboard. And so I said, oh, what beautiful children. And, and then just talked about family. So in other words, combination of luck and street smart, and somebody was watching over me. That's all I can say.
And knowing when to get out of there. So that one story about, I think it was that same driver where there suddenly, it seemed like out of nowhere was a street light that turned red and let you and your friend jump out of the car.
Exactly. And I didn't even know if the door was going to be unlocked, and thank God it was. So yeah, lots of, and we all have narrow escapes. I mean, whether it's illness or a car getting too close or all of those things. And so I think it's quite universal. And that's why I'm superstitious at times, and I knock on wood and just say, keep going.
How does it feel now? I don't know about your other books because I haven't read them in the same detail I've been reading Narrow Escapes, but how does it feel to have things that have been printed and they're out in the world that are so deeply personal?
Well, I started that with Burned, a memoir, which is about the story of my parents who were burned in an explosion. And when I was 4, and we were separated from them for 9 months. And as a young adult, I never talked about it. Never, ever, ever. And it was only when I started having a period of some panic attacks, probably triggered by what happened, that I started to actually talk to people about it. My mother was facially disfigured. So, there wasn't any way I could hide it, that she had been burned, but it was off limits to talk about. So how do I feel about it? I've been doing it for a long time, since writing Burned and putting that out in the world. That came out in 2010. But I must say, the minute I did a newsletter and sent it out to all my friends and family, I felt nervous. I felt like it's like having a baby. Is the child going to have 10 fingers, 10 toes? What are people going to say? And yeah, having something so personal was hard. Plus, I have some old boyfriends in there, but I changed their names. So I went through one night where I was having trouble sleeping, and then I thought I actually toned it down a little bit. So when I wrote the book, I thought, okay, if either of them read it, it wouldn't be too bad. But it is a daunting thing. But as a memoir teacher, I'm reading, the most difficult stories that you can imagine, and everybody has something that's happened in her life. And just holding the story and allowing that person to talk about it, whether it's just in a small group or publication, is such a thrilling experience, because you realize that person has opened up. And there's a sense, I don't like using the word closure, because I don't really necessarily believe in that, but there's a certain peace that comes from just getting it out, getting it off your chest, as they say.
What was, not necessarily from your old boyfriends, but what's been the reaction to Narrow Escapes? What, generally speaking, do people say?
It just came out. Originally, it was going to be March 16th, but it came out a bit early. I've only had 4 people comment. And so far, similar to you, which just totally thrills me, people say they couldn't put it down. And there's a main character in the book, my friend Ken, and I just got a text this morning. I sent him the book. He helped out with the book, and he's also in the book a lot. And he said, "I love the book. It made me cry." And I just thought, if that's all that I got from writing the book, I just want to bask in that instead of thinking, oh, I need to do this or that, or send it out to awards. There's all that in my head too. But yeah, I've touched a few people. So
yeah, I'm reading about Ken. He is he fully comes across as just a beautiful person, and a person that you read enough about him in your book that you almost feel like you know him. I mean, in a certain kind of way, and just want to sit down and have a cup of coffee with him, and just
yeah. And he's become a very well-known art historian and curator, and had, a wonderful career. But he really, we helped each other. But I felt his solidity, along with his ability to be an artist and all of that, really stabilized me at a time. And he was coming out as gay during that time of his life, very early, I must say. For 1968, which I really admire. He said, "This is who I am." And it was the happiest day of my life. Not that it was hard. And for me, because I was really dealing with, my parents' burns and stuff, he was one of the only people I told about it and how it got to me. So yeah, we really supported each other in all kinds of ways forever, really.
One of the things, and you say this in your book, but I actually thought this is just incredible, isn't it? That one of the worst encounters you had was after you got back to New York.
Yep.
Of all the situations you were in, the worst outcome was when you were in New York. That is amazing.
Yeah. And I think, as we're writing now with a lot more consciousness too about people in different countries, I did not want to make my encounters with Moroccan men. Nothing bad, nothing terrible happened. Right. There were scary things, but, it can happen anywhere, and in any part of the world. If you're 19 and you're walking around, not thinking about, where you are or so. Yeah. So in New York, and that was a total surprise because I grew up in a pretty upper middle class block, but New York is a kind of block to block city sometimes. So yeah, I was assaulted just a block from my home and saved, thank God.
Yeah, that was a very hard time. That was a very hard part of the book to read because it was scary and it was awful. It was just an awful experience.
And I think just to add a quick thing about that, I think how everybody reacted to the assault was very hard for me because it wasn't a time where, right away you get a counselor, right away you talk about it. And my parents were in the medical profession. And so they did everything right medically. But emotionally, I was, except for Ken, who said, poor baby, and hugged me. Otherwise, I was kind of left on my own. And I didn't really deal with that for many, many years and still haven't totally. Those things, you still can get triggered, but,
yeah.
I'm 10 times better.
I think that of all the things that we just still need to keep doing, one of the things it seems to me we have made a little bit of progress with is helping women deal with the psychological part of attack.
Totally.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have been a writer all your life, really, in one way or another, it seems to me. Describe your process of writing. Where do you like to write? What do you like to have around you? What's your ideal writing scenario?
Well, it's interesting because when I was younger, and especially when I was writing Burned, which took on and off about 15 years, although I teach memoir classes now to help people do it faster. But when I was writing, my kids were young. I was working at that time at 2 different colleges teaching English. I would write when they took final exams. I had a Monday night writing where my husband would take the kids to get a video. In those days, he went to the video store and ordered a pizza. So they loved my writing night. I would come home at 4, close the door, and sometimes take a nap and write till 11. I was so driven to write anytime, anywhere. It didn't matter. I could write on a napkin at a coffee shop. I mean, words just spun through my head. So, over the past year since I left City College, I joined the Writers Grotto. And for a long time, pre-COVID, I had an office that I went to where I pretty much wrote narrow escapes. And, the hard thing for me is making myself get up and walk around, especially we were talking about aches and pains of old age. Now, the room I am in right now, I call my writing room. For a while, we were renting it out for Airbnb, but now I've reclaimed it. So, it has some of my daughter's collages, a little bit of awards, pictures of my grandkids and my kids and my husband. So I have, I have a space that's mine. I don't always sit on the chair that I'm sitting on now. Sometimes I work in bed, which I like to do. And I'm not sure what I have a novel that I wrote. I've had it edited once. And I think as soon as this book is launched, I am going to go back to that. But I haven't been writing a lot lately. It's not like I have 3 days a week where I write. I'm taking a bit of a break.
That must be one of the first breaks you've taken from writing in your life.
I know, it's funny because when you said 6 books, I'm thinking, how did I do that?
But now you have a room of your own to write in.
Exactly.
Right?
Virginia Woolf would be happy. Yeah.
So when somebody says to you, and this must happen with the teaching that you've done, when somebody says they want to be a writer, and how do I do that, Louise? How do I be a writer? What do you tell them?
Well, I try not to start with, boy, it's a tough route, because, and you have, I think I'd be very encouraging. I would just say, what have you written? What are your projects? I would encourage people to take classes. There are anything from free classes at some of the public libraries. Sometimes people will teach memoir. There are classes that I teach through the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, classes at UCLA. I'm talking about California here, but Stanford Continuing Ed, they're all on Zoom. So I would encourage people to take classes, to go to conferences, to go to readings, and that's completely free. And if you live in a somewhat urban area, you can go to bookstores 3 times a night and hear people read. And through that way, sometimes you can get in touch with people who are writing similar things to you. I'd encourage people to reach out to writers if you can find their info or websites and just say, I really like your work. Do you want to? Not everybody will respond, but if you have time for a quick conversation. And honestly, I really see part of my role in life as a teacher and helping people move on in their lives. So, I will write blurbs. I will do almost anything to help people. So if somebody wants to be a writer, and I've had a lot of conversations with people, and sometimes they want to do it on the side, and sometimes they want to, really go to an MFA program and apply and then either teach or do freelance. It's not an easy life, I would say, economically, unless you teach or you have a big hit, which can happen.
That's what interesting about contacting authors and listening to book readings. I, not too long ago, discovered I like to read mysteries oftentimes. I am sort of light mysteries. In a murder mystery, there's somebody gets killed, but it's not gory. It's just that they get killed, and then they got to find out who did it. And I discovered a writer not too long ago that I really liked, and I found her email address and sent her an email, and I'd never done that before, and it was really fun, and she responded.
Wow, that's great.
And I have written a couple books, and I have gotten some emails from people I don't know, and it's really nice. So I would encourage people, what you said, I would encourage people, contact authors, because
exactly.
Maybe when somebody's a really big deal author, they get tired of it. But boy, I tell you, until you get to that point, it's a wonderful thing to hear from readers.
Yeah, and I even when I wrote co-authored How to Bury a Goldfish, Rituals for Everyday Life, we were looking for blurbs. And I thought of Mary Pfeiffer. I don't know if you know her book, Reviving Ophelia.
Yeah.
It's basically saving the souls of teenage girls. She's an amazing person. And I thought, oh, I would love a blurb from her, but she's famous and she's busy. And then I found out that she goes to the Unitarian Church, which I had gone to for years with my kids. So I sent a note and a copy of the manuscript to the Unitarian Church. I think she lives, I can't remember where she lives, in the Midwest somewhere. And within 4 days, she had read it and written me a blurb. And it was wild. So yeah, I say to people, try anything.
Ask.
But yeah, ask. And you also have to have, I would say, as a writer, kind of a hard shell. In other words, when I was sending poems out, I would send out to maybe, let's say, 20 places. And if I got one acceptance, I would be thrilled. So, there's somebody once said, you have to have a lot of rejections before you have an acceptance. So if you get a lot of rejections, it means you're trying. Maybe you need to go back and revise, but at least you're trying.
I heard somebody not too long ago talk about it is hard to deal with that because it's just constant rejection or not hearing anything, which is almost like worse. Exactly. I heard somebody saying, this doesn't work for me, but it might work for somebody, to try to change your image of what you're doing. You're trying to get at least 20 rejections. Oh, I'm on 18. Yippee. I've only got 2 more to go. And then if you get enough rejections, at some point, there's going to be some acceptance.
Yeah, exactly. And yet there is a reality that, maybe you need to revise.
Yes.
I mean, Narrow Escapes, my latest book that just came out, I think I revised the whole book 4 times. And I worked with 2 editors, one a friend and one somebody in New York who I paid. So it was not as if, I sat down and wrote the book and that was it. I think maybe Isabel Allende can do that, but not a lot of people can. And the other thing is I've taught so many writers, and some people are writing to pass down a legacy. They're trying to pass something down to their children, grandchildren, or friends. And so, people write for all kinds of reasons, or something's really bothered you for years, a regret or something that happened. And by the act of writing it down, there's a sense of healing, feeling more at peace with what happened, or discovering, because writing is also discovery.
Yeah, I oftentimes find that I don't know how I really feel about something until I write about it. And then it gradually becomes clearer in my mind. I think that's an interesting process.
Exactly.
Of all the things you've written, Louise, which is your favorite book? Is that a fair question or not?
Oh boy, these are my babies. Choose. I'd say the one so far, and I'm hoping Narrow Escapes will hit that level in terms of what people are saying about it. But the one so far I'm most proud of is Burned, because it did get into Oprah magazine and it won this Library Association award from Wisconsin. And it's, the major story of my childhood, which was really silenced for a lot of reasons. So, yeah. In a way, Narrow Escapes was much easier to write because I had more experience. When I wrote Burned, I had to learn how to write dialogue. I had to learn what you need to do to create a character. All those things that you don't have to do as a poet. So I already loved language, but it was very challenging.
That's really interesting. I never thought of that before. That learning to write dialogue, that's a real skill, isn't it?
It is. And, some people, because I've had so many students, are just naturals at it. It's like, whoa, that sounds exactly like that person. But a lot of people write, their sentences are too long. There are too many he said, she said, when it's already clear. It's a skill. It's a skill. And the good thing is, and this is what I believe, it can be taught. It's not as if somebody's totally born a writer. Maybe people have talents, but I really believe all of this can be taught.
Oh, that's a real relief for people who really would like to get better at writing. That it is learnable.
Exactly. And there's a book that I use for memoir called Writing the Memoir by Judith Barrington. And I feel like she really breaks it down, and it's very helpful and has a lot of prompts. People can just pick prompts to do something every day.
How did you decide to focus on memoir? Because of having written Burned?
Well, I was writing these long narrative poems, and it just didn't contain the story well enough. And I must say, if I had had time or wanted to, probably taking a bunch of classes on how to write memoir would have helped. But I knew I had to write that story. After I spent forever, or a long time, I shouldn't say forever, a long time writing that story, I just thought, this is it. I'm going to write fiction from now on. I don't want to have to get the facts right. A friend of my mother sent me a page of things I had gotten wrong. And she said, if you ever republish, you need to get this right. And yeah, I just thought, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to deal with potentially hurting people's feelings. That's a whole other issue. I mean, I ended up basically talking to people, and making sure everything was okay before I published it. But so I started this novel, and then I wrote a piece on my travels to Morocco, which, as you know, are very dramatic and suspenseful. And it got rejected twice. And the editor said, there's not enough of an arc. And the second time, there's not enough of an arc. And she said, but this could be a book. And so I thought, okay, I'll write a book. So whatever, how many ever years later, I have a book. And I keep saying never again memoir. But
well, we'll see. We'll just see about that. That's interesting. I one of the books I wrote, I didn't realize that a couple of people I wrote about would be hurt by what I said. If I had thought about that, I would have let them read it and see, but it never occurred to me. And that was a real learning experience. And I thought, oh, golly, about people who write these tell-all books.
Right.
The number of people that are hurt in that process, that was a real awakening.
Yeah. And I think we all do it to some extent, but it's important, I guess, or hopefully before it comes out. I had to check things out with my cousins, because my mother was, talk about, prime spark. She was an amazing person and got a master's degree, in the 1920s, when a lot of women did, continue their education. So, but my uncle, her brother, never finished high school. And I had put that in the book. And yet he went and he got a high school diploma. He created a wonderful life for his children. And he took me and my sister in for a year when my parents were burned, and created a beautiful family sense of safety and security. So I told him that's what I was really saying. It didn't matter that my mother had a master's degree, and he, so he said, okay. He said, but You got the dog wrong. It was a basset hound and not a beagle. That upset him more than anything.
Oh, that's great. That's a great story. So what's next, Louise? What is your next book, or what is your next project? So is it this novel that you're going to get out of the drawer and focus on again, or is it something else, or is it not writing, or what is next?
I feel I'm in a state where I am not sure, and I think that's okay. I mean, my husband will be 80 this year. He has some heart issues. He's actually doing quite well, but I feel, time is of the essence, and I want to take walks with him, spend 1 or 2 days a week, maybe going and doing a short hike somewhere. So that's definitely something I want to do. I took each of my daughters on a weekend by themselves, one to Joshua Tree and one to the Sierras. And I like to do more of that, spend more time with them. They live in California, fortunately, but not too close. So more time with friends, especially after COVID, I shouldn't even say after COVID, but during this whole period of time, more time with friends. And I have been getting little inklings that I want to get back to my novel. So I think that I do have some wrist issues talking about getting older kind of things, but I think I can figure that out, and do a kind of retreat and see where that takes me. But I'm not sure.
Yeah, and that's fine. I mean, you just finished the last book, and so you may not be ready to turn around and just do anything right now other than exactly what you want to do with your husband and just relax with your daughter, your kids. And that, I think, we all get to those points, and it's sort of a that rest between and until you're sort of ready to go again. That's
and exercise more. I've been trying to do that, and that really lifts my spirits and makes me feel better. And I think great for everybody.
Absolutely. I think it's definitely one of the things that can help us stay feeling as healthy and vibrant as possible, to get as much exercise as we can. Do you, just in closing, when you were talking about your wrist, do you write on a computer or laptop, or do you handwrite?
No, I don't handwrite, although I recognize that can create a little more flow sometimes. No, I write on a laptop, and I actually need to get a keyboard that, because I'm writing over the laptop, and I think that's affecting my wrist. So there are things I can do, and there are also dictation programs that I've thought about. So there are ways that, I could deal with that. And I do not do downward dog because it really hurts my wrists.
Good. That is something you shouldn't do. I have trouble doing that anymore because of my shoulders. So we all find things that just don't quite work anymore.
Right.
So, Louise, this was so much fun listening to you. And if somebody would like to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Yep, they can feel free to email me at Louise, Louise, Nayer, N as in Nancy, Ayer, at gmail.com, or look at my website, www.louisenayer.com.
Great. Thank you. So that's our time today. Please join us again. You can find our Prime Spark podcast on every popular outlet. Find out more about Prime Spark at www.primesparkwomen.com. Thank you so much to my guest, Louise Nayer. And don't forget, you can find her at her website, www.louisenayer, N as in Nancy, AYER.com, or louisenayer@gmail.com. Thank you for being with us. Take care, spread tolerance and love. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode and would like to stay updated, you can head over to my website, primesparkwomen.com, and get my free Spark Guide, 7 questions to ignite your spark, to help you discover your own spark. See you in the next episode.